Hi everyone. In this video we're going to discuss substitution into algebraic expressions. Now that sounds like a mouthful. Algebraic expressions are really just number sentences that involve algebra. Now what you've learned already is that algebra includes values called variables or letters, and these letters can stand for any number. What substitution means is that you choose what number each variable is going to stand for, and then you work out what the number sentence means. Now, firstly, to start, let's go over some notation used in algebra. So I've put some examples down to help us understand. So the first one says 3x. Now, if I've got a number and a variable stuck together like that, what that actually means is 3 times by x. So whatever x is going to be multiplied by 3. Similarly, in the next question, if I've got a, b, that means whatever the value is of a times by whatever the value is of b. And the next one, I've got 2, c, d, e. So that means 2 times c times d times e. Now, if the number involved is the exponent, that means a different thing. That is going to mean y cubed, y times y times y. Now, the thing about the exponent is it only applies to the number it is next to, or the variable it's next to. So if I look at the next question, that squared only applies to the q. So what that means is 2 times p times q times q. However, if I want the square sign or the exponent to apply to everything, I put a bracket around the whole expression. And so here I'm going to have 2 times s times t times 2 times s times t. And what that will equal to is 2 times 2 is 4, s times s is s squared, and t times t is t squared. In the last example I have here, what this means is I'm saying 3 times by u minus v. So here I would first need to calculate the brackets, first subtract, and once I have the answer from what I've subtracted, then I'm going to multiply by 3. So now that we've revised some of the notation used in algebra, let's do some substitution questions. So here's my example. I've said if a is equal to 2, b is equal to negative 1, c is equal to negative 3, and d is equal to 0, evaluate the following. Now the word evaluate is the same as saying something like calculate. So, or you want to work out how much it is. So in the first question, I've got 3a. So what that means is 3 times a, and I know that a is going to be 2. So I'm going to say 3 times a, and 3 times a is going to give me 6. Now just remember, when you do substitution, a good idea is to put the substitution values in brackets so that you don't get mixed up with signs and it's easy to work out what's going on. So let's look at the next one. AB. AB means A times B. The value for A is 2, and the value for B is negative 1. So I'm going to say 2 times by negative 1. Now a negative times a positive is negative, and 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, the next one. Now in the next question, I already have some brackets. So I need to be careful that I don't get myself completely mixed up with brackets. So let's use a square bracket here just to help us. So I'm going to have 2. A is 2. C is negative 3. Minus negative 3. And let's close the square bracket. So if we look at how the brackets work, we've got the square bracket opening and closing at the beginning and end. And then I've written all my substitutions in round brackets. Now, The rules for BODMAS always apply. So I'm going to multiply first. So I'm first going to multiply the 2 by -3, and then I'll add later. So what I get here is 2. Let's leave the square bracket there. I haven't applied it yet. 2 times -3 is -6. And here I've got minus -3. So I'll have +3 and close my square bracket. So then I'm going to get 2 minus 6 plus 3. It's going to give me 2 times by, let's work out in the bracket, -3. And at the end, 2 times -3 gives me an answer of -6. So I'm sure you can see it helps to know how to work with integers here, because if you get mixed up with the integers, even though your substitution was correct, you might land up with the wrong answer. I have some more questions. However, I still have the same values for A, B, C, and D. So in question 4, I'm going to square C. So C is -3 squared. Now, do you see how important it is to have that bracket there? Because, as a side note, if I was to say -3 squared, that would give me an answer of -9. But if I say -3 all squared, that gives me an answer of 9. So be very careful with the brackets. So I'm going to have -3 squared minus d squared, or d, sorry, which gives me 0. So -3 squared is 9 minus 0, and so my answer is 9. In the next question, 2 times by A, which is 2, times by B, which is -1, and only the B is squared, plus C, which is -3, to the power of D is 0. So let's first do my powers. So I'm going to say -1 squared is going to give me +1. So 2 times 2 times 1 plus, and we've learned that anything to the power of 0 is 1. Doesn't matter if the number to the power of 0 is negative or positive, anything to the power of 0 is +1. So now I can finish up. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. Next question. In this question, I'm going to square everything inside the brackets. So let's first work out what's inside the brackets. I'm going to have 3, and then B is going to be -1, and C is going to be -3, and I'm going to put everything to the power of 2. Now, as you can see in this question, I haven't written my substitutions in brackets like I've done in all the others. You don't always have to show your substitution in brackets, although it's very helpful to. But in this case, because I already have brackets, it's going to look a bit confusing with more brackets. So I was just very careful with how I wrote down what I have. So let's see. Inside the brackets, a negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 1 is 3, times 3 is 9. And I'm going to square that. So 9 squared is 81. Let's go on to our last few questions. Here I've got 3c minus b all over 2. So let's see what's going on here. So I'm going to say 3 times by c, which is -3, minus b, which is -1, all over a, which is 2. Now the top looks like it needs some work. So 3 times -3 gives me -9, and -1 times negative is a +1 out of 2. So at the top, I'm going to get -8 out of 2, and so my final answer is -4. That brings us to our last question. So in this last question, I have c cubed, which is -3 cubed, out of d, which is 0. Now remember, I'm not allowed to divide by 0 in maths. If I divide by 0, it's called undefined. So it doesn't matter what's at the top. My final answer is going to be undefined. Now hopefully that helps you with some substitution questions. Remember some important things. Firstly, when you substitute, it's important to put the substitution values in brackets. Sometimes you can choose not to use brackets, but I suggest that most of the time you use brackets. Secondly, when you multiply out or when you square, be very, very careful with negative signs so you don't get yourself mixed up. And thirdly, remember the order of operations. You must multiply before you add and subtract, and before both of those, you must use brackets and powers. So all the best with your substitution work, and if you're not so sure, go over the video again and see if that helps you.